Fallout 3. A game I've warmly regarded in my heart as one of my favorites since it came out in 2008. It was my first exposure to the Fallout franchise and led me to buying the previous two games and loving them too. I know a lot of people have spurned it for bastardizing the series in their eyes, but it introduced me to a set of games I may have never explored without it. I purchased the Collector's Edition, earned every achievement twice on both Xbox and PC, and lost the Collector's Edition bobblehead because I actually have 10 IQ. I poured hours and hours into this game and many more into New Vegas. It really opened my eyes to the idea of roaming in a post-apocalyptic world and doing whatever I wanted. Up until the past 2 or 3 years, if you had asked me what my favorite games were, Fallout 3 was always included. But recently I've realized that it's been a good 8 years or so since I've actually given the game another shot. So if you've kept up with my channel at all, you know the drill by now, and we're going to go through close to every part of this game. Meaning, spoilers. Anyways, let's do this. You want to hear what a nut sounds like in musical form? Why do all these main menu themes gotta be so goddamn good? Alright, before we get to character creation, we gotta listen to some lore.
Because in Vault 101, no one ever enters, and no one ever leaves.
After making your character, and getting told that your future's going to be really bright, your mom just biffs it right next to you. After that, you go through a montage of ages from 10 years old to 16 and winding up at 19. This place is fucked up. The other kids are all pretty much uncontrolled and annoying bullies. The Overseer rules with an iron fist and sets children to do work at 10 years old. He also uses Butch and his crew to control other kids. The test that you're made to take at 16 is riddled with violent and morally questionable multiple-choice answers, and presented as a super serious exam even though the teacher obviously thinks it's bullshit. And when your dad manages to leave the vault, the Overseer's men grab his closest friend and kill him over it. Dude, I missed this game. During this time, you also learn about VATS. Now, VATS has always been a pretty big point of contention among fans of the series. Some people hate it with a passion, some people can't play without it. I like it mainly because I have the accuracy of a lamppost, and when 4 things round the corner to fuck me up, I can at least flail around with the last one for 20 seconds and have a decent chance of killing it. It's honestly an interesting part of Fallout that's surprising to see translated to the first-person games. A lot of the argument is that it's literally auto-aim in an otherwise FPS, but I respect it for what it is because it really is the only series which does this in a first-person setting. No one in their right mind would tell you that being able to freeze time to pick things out to shoot is a good idea on paper. But I just feel like the series wouldn't be the same without it. And hey, no one forces you to use it. If you feel like it cheapens the experience, then you don't have to smash that VATS key. Beyond VATS, the shooting and gunplay in the game feels fun in the way that your opponents tend to explode a lot more than they should, but the actual combat does feel much older than I remember. Hip firing is abysmal, and the zoom doesn't give you iron sight, it gives you the classic Counter-Strike meme of moving your neck forward. I would love to make a melee-oriented character, but melee weapons just don't feel particularly good in Fallout 3. I do like the fact that certain enemies will actually run away from you if they're injured enough. It feels a lot more real when that happens. Enemies are also definitely less aware than they should be, seeing as you can absolutely unload on some poor raider and then 10 of his buddies will still be AFK in the corner of the room. But as soon as the tips of your Air Jordans touch the alert radius, a CSI investigation begins for the location of the intruder if your stealth isn't high enough. You can be spotted 10 miles out by a super mutant and then forgotten if you crouch mid-firefight. I'm not outraged by the combat feel and the enemy behavior in Fallout 3, but I'm definitely less impressed than I used to be. Then again, I just came off of Morrowind combat, so I'm good. Anyways, when you try to exit the vault, a fleet of armored men come to beat your ass or casually put a bullet or two into your chest. When you're done missing them, because apparently your character is a silver-ranked McCree when he hip-fires, you move on out to the vault exit. I will always remember the first time I stepped out of Vault 101 in this game, and that feeling still resonates to this day for me. You're just admiring this bright, desolate wasteland and wasteland. Anyways, that feeling still resonates strongly with me, and it honestly feels more refreshing than Oblivion's sewer escape. There's something bittersweet about finally escaping the very samey looking vault into the bright surface that's a wasteland at this point. Honestly though, I couldn't help but notice that the game always seems to have this green tint wherever I go. It's like the devs went, ah yes, nuclear winter means that we need to tint the whole game green, right? It's kind of weird because it's been 200 years since the bombs fell, and I apparently wasn't the first one to think this because this mod's been around for a while. I know modding has been a pretty great debate at this point. A lot of people insisted that I mod Oblivion because it's old and dated and the character faces look like jars of Play-Doh that have come to life. And others insist that I shouldn't mod these games because it sabotages the whole point of this kind of video. The way I see it, if I'm just making minor graphical changes, it shouldn't matter. Because if you want me to answer, does a game from 2008 look as good as I remember, the answer is always going to be no. I've never been the type to spurn a game for its graphics unless it's a brand new game that boasts about them and then falls flat. Anyways, I made the game a little less green, and we're gonna make it through that together. So when I started to get my bearings, I immediately beelined it for Megaton. I love Megaton. It's easily one of my favorite cities in any Bethesda game simply because you can literally wipe it off the map. I usually play a pretty morally good character, but even as a kid I had to test out the evil result of this quest. There's quite a few characters that have their own backstories, quests, and obligations, and you could just annihilate them. That is an amazing world-building decision. I decided for this run that I'd like to talk to everyone around Megaton and do the quests that I'm interested in first before deciding on whether or not I wanted to nuke the town or not. So beyond that, you meet the sheriff who immediately lets you take a look at the bomb to disarm it for some reason. No trust necessary. Then you ask around at Moriarty's saloon for your father and you run into a ghoul. Ghouls are a great addition to the game because it's immediately revealed that most of them are treated very poorly, and there's a reason why they're treated the way that they are. Looks are a big thing, but when you can roam around the wasteland and get swarmed by feral ghouls, it would probably make anyone think twice about trusting one. It's a sad reality, but it's one that's pretty realistic. Asking both Gob and the prostitute Nova reveals that Moriarty treats most of the people around him pretty poorly, and that he's a very shrewd and morally gray businessman who happens to know where your father went. One of my favorite things about this game are the speech checks, and by extension any knowledge check which scales with a certain amount of points that you have in a category. It really makes me feel good about putting extra points into a certain skill because it's nearly always worth it from a skill check perspective. Megaton really is the perfect town for the game to kick off with, even if you can technically avoid it. The game points pretty heavily in the direction that the player can find it as soon as possible, which is a great choice. The people here are a perfect example of how humans have gotten along with life after the bombs fell, showcasing both their compassion and distrust for other humans. Moriarty is a really good example of that because everyone will tell you that he's a piece of shit that basically tries to take advantage of others. But when you talk to him, he's pretty damn upfront and somewhat polite to you, even though he owes you nothing. If you manage to pass his speech check, he even tells you where your father headed off to. If you don't, you have to pay him for the knowledge or get into his terminal to figure it out. It's in his terminal where it's revealed just how conniving the guy really is, and how he keeps tabs and holds grudges on many people. It's just a really good example of someone who's witty and eloquent enough to survive this long and open his own business in the wasteland. But anyways, let's discuss the karma system real quick. I love this system as a concept, and I missed the hell out of it in Fallout 4. Basically, when you perform good acts for good people and are generally polite, you get a specific amount of good boy points. You can also increase the amount of good boy points received if you outright refuse quest rewards, and by donating caps and supplies to those in need. You can also just choose a perk at a later level to make you good. If you have enough good boy points, you can redeem them for a delicious mouth-watering all-new Yeehaw Tender Crisp Bacon Cheddar Ranch sandwich from Burger King. You can also earn bad boy points by performing particularly heinous acts, including but not limited to eating a corpse, killing innocent people, being a dick, injecting the wasteland's water supply with vaccines, or reading a terminal that you don't own. If you choose to accumulate enough bad boy points, you can redeem them for a permanent hotel suite in the richest part of the capital wasteland. But I really wanted that burger. In all honesty though, the karma system is a great start in Fallout 3, but it doesn't really affect as much as I think it should. Sure, there are a few times that I can take a certain speech route that I wouldn't be able to otherwise, but for the most part I've never felt like it mattered all too much if I played a good, neutral, or evil character. Most of the story choices wind up going down the same route, and the game tends to not restrict you too much if you dip into being evil or good during your endeavors. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing because you could argue that it's great that one player can play the game how they want to play it and not lose access to other parts, while another player can play the game completely differently and not be restricted as well. But you could also be the type of player who wants to play the game first as a good character, and then the second time as an evil character. And the reality is that most of the game is going to be the same. Most people are going to treat you normally at first glance, and the dialogue is still going to steer in the same direction, even if you're a dick or a goody two-shoes. Also, stealing everything in an area is one of the most maddening things in Fallout 3, seeing as the game would be much better off playing an evil soundtrack instead of the loud screeching sound that you get from losing karma. At the end of the day, the karma system kinda just makes it so that you have access to 3 different sets of partners depending on your alignment, and affects who pursues you throughout the game. If you manage to stay neutral, you don't get pursued by either faction, and you get access to the biggest speech boost, and skill boost in general, in the game, if you choose to take the perk. Being good or evil have comparatively weak rewards in the form of someone giving you random shit. But at least being good gives you access to the best partner in the game, my guy Fox. Anyways, to kick off my questing, I hit up Moira Brown, resident insane person. She tasks the player with injuring themselves, irradiating themselves, and putting themselves into many dangerous situations. It's a great set of quests to kick off the game in a way that teaches the player about the wasteland. Your tasks include hurting yourself so that she can ask you how it feels, making your way through a raider-filled grocery store, observing Mirelurks, beating mole rat ass like someone denied the hound chicken, and getting attacked by an entire state. For the final chapter of Moira's research book that you're helping her out with, she sends you off to figure out the history of Rivet City. This also coincides with quite a few other quests, including the main quest, and it gets a little overwhelming trying to figure out what to do next. Dude, Rivet City sucks. I'm sure it's accurately designed to replicate the interior of a ship, but I honestly loathe it with all of my being. There's hardly any distinguishing marks beyond written signs to tell you where you're at. The whole thing is this big, stupid mess of gray infrastructure, and is generally a nightmare to navigate and find people in. If it isn't fun to navigate, why would you put it in your game? But anyways, I usually like setting aside the main quest and hitting side quests / factions first in Bethesda games. But it's pretty difficult to shake the main quest in Fallout 3 at first. It's not a bad thing, honestly. More often than not, it feels weird to start the main quest as the master of everything and get treated like a nobody. So it's refreshing to naturally fall into information about your father and figuring out why he left. So far, it seems like he's been all over the wasteland trying to revitalize his life's work. He was working to try to purify all of the wasteland's water supply alongside your mother, and then your birth and your mother's death put the brakes on everything, with your father retreating into Vault 101. After figuring out the city's history, I went off to the Robco factory. It was this journey in particular that made me realize how good it feels to explore the wasteland. I ran into these asshole Brotherhood of Steel members who treat you like you're a caveman, a group of ghouls with no special dialogue huddled around a fire, and I ran into a group of raiders that I decided were a little too powerful for me. This might just be the earlier levels of the game, but it honestly feels pretty damn balanced right now. I'm not a superhuman badass who can just steamroll enemies. I need to use cover to fight. I need to use weapons I might not normally use. And sometimes I just need to walk away because I know when I can't handle a group of enemies. I like that a lot. Beyond that feeling of weakness in this harsh environment, sleeping is really hard to do without paying up. I'm sure there's a way to cheese caps. I'm sure there's probably 2,000 beds that I can sleep in for free. But from my experience during a casual playthrough, I was doing my best to scrounge up caps, trying not to spend them all at once. And renting a bed or visiting the doctor was sometimes just not in my wheelhouse if I was saving up for supplies or repairs. Not healing from waiting can be surprisingly brutal when you know you're only one big fight away from blowing through your entire Stimpak supply. I found myself journeying to Minefield just for the free bed, at least until I could find a better place or earn a lot more caps. I was having a great time, but I couldn't help but feel a little mixed about the game's leveling system. I actually really like the idea of allotting my points whichever way I wanted to, and I really love the perk system. But there's a lot of Elder Scrolls mannerisms which I found myself doing and having to shake off. Like, I keep trying to sneak everywhere to get my sneak skill up, or pick open every little lock even when the experience rewarded is negligible and the reward is likely not worth the effort. There's something about not ranking up from performing the associated actions that kind of just bugs me, I guess. And it's a bit jarring to go from being horrible at a particular skill to being nearly a master in a matter of maybe 4 levels or so if I focused my skill points on it. I guess it's not the worst system in the world, but it always felt a bit cheap when I decided to spend a level pumping all of my points into one skill. I think it's more of a personal preference, honestly. Beyond that, some of the experience disparity is a bit odd. Like a mole rat rewards the same amount of XP as a Robco security robot, despite the robot being able to shoot from afar and take more hits before going down. At any rate, my final task for Moira's book actually trickled into quite a few other quests. The first of these quests were those. Like that's the name of the quest. This kid survives these flame-throwing ants, and you have to stop these ants by teaming up with this Melvin down here, who gives you a pretty sweet perk for helping him. And then you can help the kid out by taking him back to the worst city in the game, and possibly any game, and finding his relative to take him in. This actually led me to being approached by another person and them telling me to stop pursuing this android. Okay, so here's what happened here. I got a quest called the Replicated Man, and it's supposed to be a really good one. I figured I'd do it later, but just through conversations with random people, I wound up by sheer dumb luck finding more information on the escaped android than I had meant to. Like, I found a few random people who gave me holotapes about the android, and I never listened to them because I'd figured that I'd do the quest later. Then this old fucker approaches me and asks me how to track this synth down because the synth is his property. I'm like, alright, sure. And then this chick approaches me and goes, I hear you're looking for the guy that I'm protecting. Like, literally the worst approach that anybody could come up with. She tells you to tell the old guy that the synth is dead, and then gives you evidence, and you present it to the old guy who storms off. What was supposed to have happened here was that you were supposed to figure out who the synth was, convince them that they are one, and then choose whether or not you want to turn him in. I took the worst route because apparently not pursuing the quest immediately was the wrong decision. Oh well. After that, I trekked to the Arlington Library to find some lost information. Now, here's where I wanted to make an addendum onto my former statement about the wasteland feeling really good to explore. Yes, the wasteland feels good to explore. The ruined city does not. In fact, as soon as I ran into my fifth pile of rubble with an invisible wall protecting it, I could almost hear my mind saying, "Welcome to Fallout 3," as the memories of this ruined city just cascaded into my brain. Like, the entirety of this city is a bunch of smaller maps that are separated by underground tunnels, subway systems, sewers, and nonsense. Even the skybox is like, fuck this, and turns gray as hell when you get into the city. There is no jumping over the rubble which separates the chunks of the city, and even if you do, you're just gonna jump outside of the map. It's a really aggravating way to navigate an open-world game, and it really wouldn't be that bad if Fallout wasn't what it is, a post-apocalyptic set of ruins. Because you can have something like the Imperial City with its different sections and loading zones in your game and not have to worry about running into mountains of immovable rubble, but it just doesn't work that way in Fallout. At any rate, I finally made it back to the library only to have some Brotherhood of Steel members clearing out the raiders so that they can get their knowledge on. There's really something to be said about the aggro system in this game when I'm facing the bookshelves trying to study, and the Brotherhood member with the Gatling gun is just unleashing hell into the rafters, and this yeehaw fuck decides to stop my knowledge quest instead of taking out the 2-ton load currently occupying the entirety of the doorway. But anyways, you collect some books, you learn some things, and you find out that the true Fallout 3 is the friends you made along the way. Also, you complete the Wasteland Survival Guide finally.
So cynical! What makes you think I'd force you to handle something so dangerous?
With the survival guide done, I moved on to helping out another resident of Megaton. I was to check in on the family of Lucy West in the town of Erifu, which had been under constant raids by a gang called the Family. When I checked in on the West home, I was greeted with their corpses, with their necks carved down to the bone. It's noted here that there's a lot less blood than there should be. In addition to this, the son was missing, so I was off to look for the family's hideout. I actually had to put my detective cap on for this one because the hideout to the family's lair was beneath a meth head's, or jet head's, lab, beneath barrels of 100% concentrated radiation. From here it was dodging trap after trap on the way through these old metro tunnels. It was actually quite the elaborate set of protection, though you gotta wonder how annoying it was for these guys to try to leave the tunnels at night. Anyways, through a series of successful speech checks, it's revealed that the son, Ian West, killed his own parents, drank their blood, and then was taken by the family to help him deal with his mental issues. Interestingly enough, the family aren't vampires, at least not in the traditional sense. They just drink blood and have a strong desire to do so. Is that what a vampire is? I don't know, it's more cannibalism, as pointed out by a few of the dialogue options. I just think it's interesting that this is basically Bethesda's vampiric approach to a non-Elder Scrolls game, and it didn't turn out that badly. I wound up convincing Ian to return to town and live with his decisions, and worked out a deal where Arafu provides blood packs to the family in exchange for protection. After Vampire Quest 2008, I moved on to Superhero Quest 2008. In this episode, I wind up in the town of Canterbury Commons, where a fight between two, people dressed up oddly are mad at each other. On one side you have a lady with 4 ants, and on the other you have a dude with 2 robots. The guy with the robots wins because they were fighting ants. Then they both run off. I'm left with the rest of the townsfolk more or less face-palming about this display. It's explained to me that these two have been going at it for a while. So I'm off to intervene between the two, starting by visiting the antagonizer. So if you've watched my Oblivion video, I give caves and cave systems a pretty hard time because they're overused and very samey feeling. Fallout 3's version of this is Grey Infrastructure. Now I know that isn't as simple or as catchy, but I assure you that Grey Infrastructure is all the rage in this game. I can almost see the stars aligning as Todd the God Howard himself takes the idea of snapping these underground chasms, metros, tunnels, and sewers together for easy map design and applies the entire idea to Fallout 4's settlement building. If you want a real bonus, this Grey Infrastructure actually branches into a cave for the antagonizer's lair. I went to chat her up and found her surprisingly hot in a weird way that I needed to take time to reflect on later, and then wound up telling her that I'll take care of her nemesis, the Mechanist, for her. So I bumble on over to this dude's robot hole and enjoy one of the best door opening sequences I've ever seen in a game before telling him that he's an idiot who's only making everything worse in the town. Then I report back to the other one and tell her that he's taken care of. Unfortunately, she can't be dissuaded from trying to kill off humanity because she is actually batshit insane. But at least she promises to move on from Canterbury Commons, so your mission is done. Next up, I stumbled upon this little house nestled into a crater of sorts. Inside this house was an older woman who told me that her husband had died and that she had been left to take care of herself by playing the violin for caravan traders. Basically, she got their spirits up with her music and they gave her supplies. The issue was that the violin she had was out of tune and it was difficult to get the correct notes out of. So she wanted me to go to Vault 92 to secure a violin from one of her long-lost ancestors. One that was supposed to be in pristine condition. I love the dialogue options in this game. You can be the most pure and naive person in the world, or a gigantic cunt if you want to. I can never bring myself to be an ass to most of these people, so it really does make me consider doing another run as a meanie McMeanhead sometime. It's a far cry from Fallout 4's lobotomized yes, no, maybe so system that usually elicits the same kind of response from people anyways. But, on to the actual quest. So you can go straight for the vault if you know where it's at, or you can scope out the Vault Tech HQ to ascertain its location. I opted for the former because I ain't got all day. I remembered this quest as soon as I stepped through the vault entrance. This is a good quest. The whole vault is this decrepit, rusted-out horror movie of a vault, and its dimly lit interiors have you scavenging for clues as to what happened. I mean, ideally, you could just run to the end, grab the violin, and fuck clean off. But there's something to be said about a setting that makes someone as impatient as me pause and go, wait, what the hell happened here? Anyways, you find out that this vault housed some of the finest musicians which Vault Tech could scrounge up and push into one area. The entire story of it is told through different terminals, audio logs, and notes. The sheer brilliance of this type of storytelling is executed perfectly in this quest. It doesn't feel shoehorned in, it made me care about what happened just from the look of the vault, and it's explained in a breadcrumb trail that culminates in the Overseer's office. It really is a treat to read a seemingly normal girl's experiences playing with a bunch of talented musicians, to her getting frequent headaches, to not being able to convey her thoughts anymore. Then reading about Vault members going crazy, ripping each other apart and needing more than 20 bullets to take down a single raging lunatic. Then finally, the reveal is that Vault Tech told the Overseer to experiment on the residents to create super soldiers. You even get to read about a guy and a girl fucking with a violin bow. That thought never even crossed my mind in my entire life until I read it, and now I'm stuck with it. But seriously, this whole quest to me just epitomizes how well a story can be told around no humans, and just audio logs, terminals, and notes. And I think that this type of quest is the kind of thing that Bethesda tried to go for in 76. But there has to be a mystery. You have to want to know what happened because of the environment. You can't just expect someone to roll up on an average diner and go, wow, what happened here? If all of Fallout 3 was just no humans and all written/auditory information, the game would be really stupid. But because this is one of the few exceptions in the game, the quest turns out to be really fulfilling. Anyways, this took a turn that I didn't mean for it to. I just wanted to convey how well this quest was done. It really is something special when I find the main objective to my quest and I decide to keep exploring anyways to make sure that I didn't miss any clues. A little further out from Vault 92 is a place called the Republic of Dave. It's a small, village, I guess, and all of the residents serve President Dave.
You will address me as Mr. President, or I will have you executed.
As it happens, I walked into the Republic during election season. Of course, the only person on the ballot is Dave, so it's not really too much of an election per se. Well, the only person on the ballot is Dave until I get there to fuck it up. This actually isn't really even a quest, but it is a little detail to the game that got a laugh out of me. I just like that Dave runs off to make another Republic of Dave when you screw everything up for him.
Things are really going to be different around here.
Anyways, back to questing. My next stop was back in Shithole Rivet City to help out its museum, the Capitol Preservation Society. My boy Abraham Washington wants me to Nick Cage the Declaration of Independence right out from underneath the super mutants. The craziest part about this to me is how sure this asshole is about the location. Yeah, you just go ahead and take the road up north there to the tunnels and then you hang a right and stroll on into the archives. And I call him an asshole because he didn't even expect me to pull it off when I did return. This place is super mutant hell. I'm not sure what these big dumb idiots do all day, or what their agenda is, but they sure are ready to lock down the archives for some reason. Eventually I got to the sub-basement where a voice over an intercom starts telling the robots below to get ready for a fight. There's a lot of great infrastructure to navigate, and super mutant hell quickly evolves into robot hell. When I finally made it to the end, a robot with a powdered wig going by the name Button Gwinnett greeted me and told me that he would fight me to the death if I tried to take the Declaration. I didn't know this was supposed to be the personality of the second person to sign the Declaration because I didn't pay attention in history class, but my character sure did. Imagine being named Button. So I convinced the robot that I was Thomas Jefferson and he surrendered everything over to me. Upon further investigation, there was a whole slew of robots created to reenact the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and that Button had been malfunctioning a little bit. I liked the end of this quest a lot, and a bit of the middle part. Actually seeing the Capitol building in the reflecting pool area was really cool, as well as seeing the Washington Monument directly across from it. But the actual navigation of the archives and its underbelly left a lot to be desired, unfortunately, because it really started to become a slog after a while. Next, I wound up at the Temple of the Union, a safe haven for slaves who had escaped their masters. You're told that although the building took on all slaves to help them, they only had so much room. This causes the leader of the group to tell you about their plan to secure the Lincoln Memorial, in the hopes that they can turn it into a much better beacon of freedom for former slaves to travel to. Again, as much as this needs to happen for a video game quest to be a video game quest, it's almost laughable when you volunteer your help and this guy goes, "Oh, okay, cool, I was hoping you would offer. Good luck taking on the super mutants." I mean, at least pretend like you're going to help me out with this, dude. I honestly feel like the leader, Hannibal, is just a poorly written character. This guy was a slave for 23 years, and he's just like, "Yeah, okay, you can stay here, but you gotta promise not to tell anyone bad." Like, dude, I could easily go to a group of slavers and tell them how many people you have here. I don't understand this line of logic. Dude even gives you the key to the front gate and it's been 2 minutes. You're sent off to find a picture of the Lincoln Memorial and to secure the monument, basically. And again, this is just one of the shittiest layouts for a map I've ever seen in a game. Look at this shit. It's like a 5-year-old drew up a treasure map. I don't know which dot leads to where because instead of just succumbing to load zones that might be a little bit inconvenient to step into, Bethesda was just like, "Nah dude, let's just make the player go underground 2 or 3 or 4 times to get where they want to be." I like to imagine there was a point where they were playtesting and someone went, "You know, this was a good idea on paper, But jumping into the metro tunnels to get everywhere is kind of cumbersome, right before Todd removed the guy's T6 thoracic vertebra. Fortunately, playtester number 53789 didn't die in vain, as shortly after, Todd decided to at least allow fast travel to buildings within the city from outside the city. As I arrived at the Museum of History, I was greeted by a ghoul who basically told me that there was a whole city of ghouls called the Undercity that was located inside the museum. While this blatant copyright infringement intrigued me, I was a man on a mission, and that mission was freedom. So after liberating some feral ghouls from their bodies, I pressed on to find the Lincoln Memorial poster and several other Lincolnlicious artifacts. After this foray, I headed over to the memorial itself to clear the super mutants, only to find it taken over by other humans. I went back to let Hannibal know and then went to negotiate with these people guarding the steps. Turns out they're slavers who are all about burning anything to do with Abraham Lincoln and obviously recapturing escaped slaves. I told their leader where to find Hannibal's group for money, and then proceeded to Duke Nukem every slaver there. That actually felt really good. But now I had to know what was up with that ghoul city at this point. So it was back to the Undercity to see what trouble I could get into. The more I talked to random ghouls, the less I found myself liking the Brotherhood of Steel, which is actually a pretty big deal to me because I've always remembered them being really damn cool. At this point, I hadn't seen a Brotherhood member gun down a normal, non-feral ghoul, but I had heard about it a few times from several ghouls. These stories, combined with passing by Brotherhood members and having them treat me like a brain-dead moron, has left me with a bad taste for this particular branch of the Brotherhood of Steel. But who knows, maybe that'll change. I'll have to join them at some point down the line. Anyways, the Undercity is a safe haven for ghouls, and definitely more than a bit seedy. Here's a good example of how this place is run.
You purchased my contract from Razrakal, so I am no longer in his service. That is good to know. Please wait here.
Have you come to say goodbye?
Yes. All right, let's go.
Yeah, this place is pretty cool. I decided to invest in Sharon here so that there'd at least be another target besides me when I'm out roaming around and hunting. What I didn't realize is that Sharon here does 700,000 damage from 200 meters away with a combat shotgun. So needless to say, I won't be receiving battle XP for a while. After recruiting this walking disaster, I ran into Mr. Crowley. He gives me a bit of a test to see if I'm, speciesist? It's not really like racist, I think. He tries to see if I don't like ghouls. Bigot, that's the one. And then he tells me that he has a hit list with 4 names left on it of all really awful bigots. He tells me that if I pop all 4 in the head and take a personal effect off of their bodies, that he'd reward me. After asking around, I find out that this is a crock of shit, and the guy really just wants to get at a set of power armor that's been sealed away in Fort Constantine. I decided I'd go off to do his bidding anyways, at least to a degree. This included visiting this fine fellow.
Jerry is my play toy. I love my cherry pie. Love it all night long. I like her half naked. I like her all.
And shaking him down for his key. Then over to Rivet City to talk to this stoner. And then back to visit our good friend Dave. Dave did not want to talk to me. And then finally to the owner of Tenpenny Tower, and possibly the embodiment of evil asshole, Alistair Tenpenny. He gave me 100 caps to not kill him, which was pretty cool of him. Finally, I headed back to Crowley to give him the news and the keys. I was gonna follow him to the fort to maybe grab the armor before he could, but he walks like a 700-pound diabetic, so I decided to yoink the keys off of him instead. The bad news is that I am not trained to wear power armor. The good news is that Sharon apparently is for some reason. What a champion. I may have killed the big bad asshole at the top of Tenpenny Tower, but there was still a matter to be settled between the residents and a group of ghouls trying their best to get in. With Tenpenny dead, the head security guard, Gustavo, took the tower over and is vehemently opposed to the idea of ghouls moving in. So, under the guise of taking care of the problem for him, I went to visit Roy Phillips, who definitely plans to unleash feral ghouls onto the tower, and I definitely killed them already on the way here. But be that as it may, I told him I'd tried to settle this peacefully. So I went and quizzed every resident with a name in Tenpenny Tower, asking them how they felt about having some ghoul neighbors. Surprisingly, about 70% or so were cool with it. The other 30% got their asses evicted. Imagine being so bigoted that you'd rather actively put your life in danger in a post-apocalyptic wasteland rather than share a posh tower with quote-unquote undesirable neighbors. Of course, none of this changed Gustavo's mind on the matter, but I figured out a way to change it eventually, and all worked out in the end for the ghouls. During my Undercity exploration, I encountered a woman named Riley in a coma in the medical area. She was no one my character had heard of, but I got the option to force her awake for some reason. As it turns out, she's the leader of a group of mercenaries who are very well known to get the job done no matter what the cost. In their last mission, they wound up fighting through 2 different buildings and were pinned down on the roof of the second one. This mission is cool, but I feel like a lot is taken away from it with the narrative. The whole thing is supposed to be that band of mercenaries who are just badasses trope. And seeing all these super mutants strewn across the 2 buildings, and especially the rooftop, is really cool honestly. But 2 things really stood out to me here. Number 1, Riley wakes up, right? I tell her to take it easy. She goes, "That's not how I do things. Can you imagine if people found out I was in the hospital while my men risked their lives?" And then she literally goes, so you want to go back into that death trap that I escaped to help them out for me? Like, really cool, Riley. Nice leadership. Number 2 is that when you finally make it up to the roof to this crew of presumably badasses, the guy in charge asks about reinforcements. You tell him that you are the reinforcements, and he's like, "Ugh, classic Riley, that's our captain to find the perfect person for the job." Like she didn't just duck out and send the first dude she saw into this hellhole. I don't know, it's not a major complaint, but it kinda soured the quest for me. Beyond that, this is where I really started to notice the mid-game difficulty, and by difficulty I mean lack of it. Where I was struggling at the beginning and really trying to conserve ammo and be safe, the mid-game is really just the opposite of that. I wasn't even checking for traps at this point most of the time. Of course, I am just playing on normal difficulty, but still. It's crazy how much of an opposite the game is at level 14, not even halfway to max level. Although I guess the DLC did add 10 more levels too, so that might be part of the issue. Either way, for some reason, part of this quest requires a fission battery to continue on. If you didn't happen to have one, you're sent back into the building for one. It's kinda silly, honestly, because you're told exactly where it's at, there are no new threats, and you come right back up with the battery. Like, I get the idea of, we couldn't take the elevator because it's broken. But man, just let me repair it without a battery if I have a high enough repair skill. It seems like a ridiculous superficial extension of the quest to tell the players to backtrack 2 minutes and then come back up with no new twists to the quest. Anyways, after that I went back down with the Rangers, killing more super mutants before they departed to their headquarters. I guess it would have been too much to move as a kill squad downtown towards the HQ, as cool as that would have been. Eventually I made it there and got rewarded with a new set of 35% conditioned armor. Again, Riley comes up to you like she's some kind of badass, telling you that you look like you've been through hell and all that shit. It just kind of bothers me, honestly, because she got patched up and instead of coming to help everyone out, she just went back to the compound.
Raiders strapped me with explosives. You've got to help me.
I was getting to a point in the game where my skills were starting to hit the cap of 100, so just to make sure I didn't overflow, I decided to seek out a few bobbleheads. Namely the Science, Lockpick, and Small Guns bobbleheads. The Lockpick one is located in the ruins of the Bethesda offices. Now this is a really exemplary instance of uninspired buildings in this game. The concept here was to replicate the Bethesda offices in Maryland, which is a really cool idea. But every part of this structure looks like the exact same thing that you've been seeing in all the other generic buildings in this game. You literally have the opportunity to stick random bits and pieces of decorations that tie into the real-life location, and you make it another ruins filled with raiders. The same graffiti, the same posters, the same baby carriages, fire hose boxes, and random machines. I mean, if you couldn't even be bothered to spruce up the representation of your own offices, then Jesus. You could explain this away, saying that it's been many years since the bombs fell, but why include it as a location in name only if you're just gonna make it so generic? It's a video game, and you already took the time to shout yourselves out. I know I'm making a big deal about this, but it really is the perfect example of the near copy and paste buildings in this game. At least the Small Guns bobblehead was located in a really cool part of the National Guard depot. Walking through the stockade of ammo, weapons, and armor was like a candy store for me, and the bobblehead was the cherry on top. But Vault 106 really takes the cake when it comes to these 3 locations. At least, That's the sentiment I wanted to roll with here. I like the idea of Vault 106, but compared to 92, it was just inferior in terms of design. When you pop into the vault, you're almost immediately greeted with a terminal that more or less tells you that the entire vault was an experiment to try out a hallucinogenic drug. This caused the dwellers to go insane, as evidenced by them attacking you when you walk down the steps. I told my partner to wait at the top so that I could investigate without him ruining the suspense. Except there was no suspense, at least nowhere near as much as Vault 92. It starts out strongly. Your screen goes to a blue tint, and you see everything as it was, presumably, before all hell broke loose. As you continue along, this happens a few more times before culminating into a finale. But the time between these hallucinations, and the lack of overall terminals, notes, or anything to give more detail about what happened really brings the whole mood down. There are all of these crazies that you gun down, and rooms packed to the brim with absolutely nothing. You eventually find a terminal that basically tells you that the security was told to deal with the people where they could, but there really isn't much more than that. There are a few terminals that appear while you're tripping out that are basically there to convince your character that staying in this hallucinatory state is good, and that you should breathe it in deeply. The quote-unquote finale of this vault is you facing down a survivor who uses a stealth boy and charges you. You hallucinate while this fight happens, and suddenly your childhood bullies are running at you. The end of this area contains a group of skeletons who seemed like they were trying to tunnel their way out of the vault. And that's it. I feel like if I had done Vault 106 before 92, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But when you compare the two, there really is no contest as to which one is better. 92's pacing and storytelling nearly constantly gave you something to read and think about between combat and navigation. 106 just tells you what happened at the beginning, and you're left with a vault that shows you what the gas it was filled with did, but no real climax beyond that. Look, we can all sit here and debate which vault is better, but at the end of the day, everyone knows that the Gary vault is easily the best vault in the entire franchise. Anyways, before moving on to the main quest, there are a few more stops I wanted to make, and both of them are pretty fucked up in their own ways. The first involved a small little average American town called Andale. The residents here are polite, red-blooded Americans living the American dream in the capital wasteland.
Family first, and any man who says anything different is saying something wrong. And you should hit that man with a stick.
They are fucking creepy. And for good reason, because they capture visitors and other outsiders and eat them. While this wasn't a quest per se, it was intriguing enough to pop up on many people's lists of best things to do in the game, and I can honestly see why. You're warned away by the old man who resides in Andale, who tells you that the town is full of killers. And upon further examination of the basement and storage shed of these houses, you'll find he's been proven correct. I love that this type of side thing exists, even if it isn't a quest. It just adds another cool thing to stumble upon to the game, and the end result leaves you with a free human pie if you play your cards right.
Stop on by anytime and ask Linda for one of her special meat pies.
I really look forward to preparing you for dinner sometime.
Last but not least, I had to visit the Oasis. Now, Oasis is one of the most unique quests in the game because it takes place in an actual forest. You're brought into the protected Oasis camp by a bunch of hippies who call themselves the Tree Minders. They then tell you that they worship a god tree who watches over and produces the Oasis's bountiful nature. After you take some mandatory psychedelics, you wake up in front of, Harold. Or was it Herbert? I think it was Bob.
Sometimes I call him Herbert instead of Bob because I get bored and I think it's funny.
Anyways, you talk to this guy and he tells you that long ago he was a normal human who got a little too radioactive and wound up fusing with a small sapling on his head. The sapling got bigger and bigger until it consumed his body where he now stands. Apparently none of the hippies listen to him, or at least they don't take him very seriously. They think that he's speaking in riddles or testing their faith. But really, he just wants one thing.
Would you please kill me?
I need you to kill me.
Yeah, old Harold isn't too happy with his life, and basically wants you to go underground and destroy his heart. So I set off to do the deed. Along the way, however, an argument between the two tree minders breaks out. One side says that Harold's influence should spread further and reclaim the wasteland with nature. The other insists that Harold must be protected at all costs, and that slowing his growth is the best way to do that. Unfortunately for these two, I was dead set on gingerly crushing his heart with my giant man hands, but I didn't tell them that. After the deed is done, the tree minders surprisingly were not hostile towards me. The one who led me in says that he finally understands that Harold was just a man with some bad luck. He then thanked me and told me that he would carry on trying to protect this grove. This quest is short and sweet, and I liked it a lot. It's a great part of the game, and it gave me a feeling that no other quest had at this point. Also, I've hardly ever felt more bad in a Bethesda game than when I burnt Harold down in an alternate save. Alright, it's time to get back to the main quest, I'd say. Wait. Nah, I'm kidding. As amazing as being able to blow up Megaton is, I just couldn't go through with it. It's a really amazing change to the game, and even the area around it becomes rightfully covered in a greenish haze. But no, I decided to take Mr. Burke out and reside in Megaton for my playthrough. Moving on, I chased my father around the wasteland for a bit before finally making it to Vault 112, where a scientist was supposed to reside that had the capability of fulfilling my father's dream of creating pure waters for everyone. When I made it to the vault, I was directed to hop into one of these pods, which I do for some reason. This takes me to Tranquility Lane, which is universally regarded as one of the best moments in Fallout 3, and for a very good reason. You're teleported to a very 1950s world, where you've taken the form of a young boy. From here, you're directed to talk to Betty, who demands that you make another boy cry. Now, at this stage of the game, I was just able to tell him that his parents were getting divorced because of him, and he bought it. But really, there was a variety of avenues here, from beating him up, to telling him that he's going to military school, to killing one of his parents. Either way, old Timmy clips his hands through his face and you've done your job. Hereafter, it's revealed that Betty is actually the doctor your father pursued. The doctor makes it very clear that he's in charge here, and that you must obey his commands or suffer his wrath. From here, the tone gets darker and darker with each request. Starting with breaking up a marriage, to getting a resident killed, to killing every single person with a knife as if you were slicing through butter. Every one of these actions has negative karma attached to it, and all of them besides the last one can be done in a variety of ways. It's amazing and really well thought out. It's quests like this that make me wish that there were more off-the-wall ideas in Bethesda games. The closest thing that comes to mind is anything that involves Sheogorath in the Elder Scrolls franchise. Of course, one could argue that this would dilute these off-the-wall moments. After I made it out of the simulation, I did a bit of research and it turns out that there is a good karma way to do this quest as well. I couldn't remember doing it in the past if I did, so I reloaded a save and went to try it out. Ah, justice. This way of doing things actually reveals just how psychotic the good doctor is, with logs about relishing the deaths of his subjects, and how he kept changing up the simulation to prevent boredom. As it turns out, the people inside are real people outside, and every time they died in the simulation, they were just brought back to life by Dr. Braun, tormented for decades and decades. So by triggering the China No. 1 failsafe, they were finally granted permanent death in the outside world, and the doctor is left to spend the rest of eternity in the simulation alone. Absolute masterpiece of a quest, by the way. Unfortunately, the main quest takes the opposite turn after this part. I should note that I've been pretty good about jerking the game off at this point, but all good things must come to an end, and the game's main quest is about to rear its ugly head. After a faraway conversation between the two big brainy science people, everyone packs up and heads to Big J's memorial for some science fun time. Now it's time for the best quest structure a person could hope for in a video game. Going down through a group of tunnels to push a button, then coming back upstairs to retrieve an item, then going back down to activate another button. How do you literally go from the best quest in the game to the worst back to back? I don't know if it was intern day at Bethesda, but all you had to do to consolidate this quest is give me the fuses immediately and tell me to do everything in one fell swoop. After crawling around the ship pipes to clear the drainage, ye olde Enclave finally makes its move. They basically pull the whole "we're taking over this project" maneuver, which involves this guy 360 no-scoping this other science girl standing by your dad. I love that line of logic. This lady could have literally known things or had ideas about the project to make it succeed that James couldn't have come up with. But nah, we should probably dome her so that we can make it super clear that we're bad, bad men in a lawless town. I guess it doesn't really matter in the end because dear old dad decides to make a purchase on the latest model of Subaru and activate the, self-destruct that was built into the machine? Or whatever. Anyways, the 3 whole threats and the 1 friendly all die because for some reason your dad's really sure that you couldn't handle 3 men at once. But then sends you out to fight the definitely more than 3 who are now in the underground escape route. You turn to old Dr. Lee who tells you, "I cannot believe your father is dead." And then you make your great escape. This escape involves you fighting off Enclave soldiers and feral ghouls. It also involves Dr. Lee going, "Stand back, I've got this terminal!" But I got to it right before her and opened up the escape route. I guess my character set the terminal to Fisher-Price hooked on phonics mode so that she could sit there and slap away at it while I did the big boy work, because she's really convinced that she's gonna get that escape route opened up. After all the threats had been neutralized, I just walked out with Sharon and hoped for the best because she was really having the time of her life on that computer. After exiting the tunnels in a very exciting battle sequence that left me on the edge of my seat and fiending for more, we made it to the Brotherhood of Steel headquarters. Or rather, I made it to the Brotherhood of Steel headquarters. Apparently things weren't going so hot in Dr. Lee's rodeo, so I had to wrangle her and Garza after waiting around for 3 hours. Fucking Garza has a heart condition, which takes 5 Stimpaks to cure for some reason. 5 Stimpaks for my character restores all of my limbs, makes me the healthiest I've ever been, and causes my dick to grow 2 inches. So I guess this average human's heart condition is near lethal at all times. Dude's the Iron Man of this video game. At any rate, we finally made it out to the Citadel together, where Lee tells the douche out front that we're here to party. After being let in, this whole conversation happens where everything is recapped. Lee is just constantly out of breath and freaking out. Old Man Lion is like, "What can I do for you?" And she's like, "Don't talk down to me!"
Don't talk down to me, Lions.
What? A lot of the writing in the main story is just some of the worst in the game. It doesn't make me care about it, and it isn't particularly compelling. And as you continue, it feels like they finally remembered to start including things that relate to the previous entries, as the game's side quests have hardly mentioned stuff like Gek or the Enclave. It's not a huge deal, but it does feel a bit shoehorned in, especially when the game starts directly referencing and changing various story elements from Fallout 1 and 2. It's explained that Gek is so important in Fallout 3 because it drastically alters earth and water to become completely clean and radiation-free. The previous 2 games seemed to treat it like it was a pretty advanced agriculture starter kit. But either way, the mission is to continue your father's work and obtain a Gek unit. This is located in Vault 87, which is bursting with radiation. I tried to see if I could cheese it and walk to the entrance directly, but yeah, no. It's very irradiated. Even more so than when you set off a nuke in Megaton. So I took the long way through Little Lamplight, which has a whole colony of children running it. And I really couldn't bring myself to care. I don't know, something about Little Lamplight just seems uninspired, not to mention stupid. Let me just run this train of logic by you, because I still can't wrap my head around it. Alright, so Little Lamplight started when a field trip of 80 or so kids were there when the bombs fell. This was in 2077. All the adults died off or left, leaving a society of kids to run Little Lamplight. Now, Fallout 3 takes place in 2277, 200 years later. How the fuck are there still kids here, running a kid-based society next to a cave filled with super mutants? They even kick kids out when they turn 16. I don't understand how the town hasn't been abandoned or ran by adults at this point. It feels like the writers wanted to pay homage to Mad Max so badly that they said, well, fuck logic. And honestly, this chain of thought applies to a lot of other shit in this game. How are there still 20 Gary clones in Vault 108? What about the insane survivors in Vault 106? Why haven't they attacked each other yet? Do they just coexist in their respective level of insanity? How are they all still alive after all this time? And who actually cares if the Enclave has possession of the water purifier? They literally want the same thing as you, but it doesn't prevent your dad from killing himself because hey, that's good writing. I don't know, this stuff isn't really game-breaking for me, but it does irritate me the more I think about it. If an idiot like me could point out these flaws, then it really should have been reworked to make more sense at this point. Anyways, I got sidetracked there. I make my way to Vault 87, where super mutants roam free. Except for one of them. That one's locked up. And they're a good guy. Basically, Vault 87 is the grounds for Fallout 3's application of the FEV mutation. It's a virus that makes super mutants, more or less. The whole thing started off as a way to hopefully create super soldiers, and in a wild turn of events, too much chemical X was added to the FEV soup, and instead of super soldiers, we got these big dopey idiots. Fox is the super mutant that was locked up for being different, and they become your partner later on. But before that, they help you out with the retrieval of the Gek unit because the hallways are very irradiated. After this, you grab the Gek, say your goodbyes, and promptly get solar flared by the Enclave. They take the Gek from you and chain you up, where you're interrogated by the big bad guy from before. Apparently the guy injected himself quickly with some kind of anti-radiation something or another in his blood vein stream thing. I don't know. Right before he begins riddling you with bullets, you're saved by the President of the United States. I know that sounds weird, but I can explain it. The President is now a centralized AI that runs the Enclave. I now trust that you fully understand. Anyways, the Prez wants you to meet him up in his office for some big secret discussion, to which the big bad guy says, "Not today, partner," and gets his soldiers killed for no reason. When you meet up with the computerized commander, he goes on to tell you that he wants you to eradicate all super mutants, ghouls, and anyone who's even slightly irradiated. To do this, he proposes that you modify Project Purity to contain a new strain of FEV that would kill off the quote-unquote impure humans and any sort of mutant. Now, if this were the entire Enclave's goal from the beginning, then I could see why your father killed himself to stop it from happening. But the reality is that this was solely President Eden's plan, and not the rest of the Enclave. And your father didn't know that. Why did the man kill himself? Once you grab the modified virus, you can get the President to self-destruct, taking himself and the entire Enclave base off of the map, by either convincing him that he's insane, using the destruction codes found in the base, or by proving to him that he's stuck in a logic loop. Kind of reminds me of being able to convince the final boss in Fallout 1 to kill himself, although with a worse script. The reward is definitely worth it, as you greet Fox, who has embraced his inner heavy weapons guy just in time to watch the fireworks. That shit is magnificent. On my way back to Rivet City, I received a distress signal from Vault 101. Upon arriving, I get told that it's absolute chaos between security and the rebels who just want to leave the vault like I did. The Overseer has gone mad and is more or less a dictator at this point. The security team is planning on killing kids without the Overseer knowing to put them in line. It's actually a pretty interesting contrast from all the other vaults, because every other vault at this point has been a worn-down wreck with evidence of chaos breaking loose, but now you're witnessing that chaos live. It's also pretty funny because all of the adults, especially the Overseer, tell you that you don't know shit and that you can't possibly know what it's like to make hard decisions. You're basically coming into this quest with a wealth of experience, and them talking down to you is kind of hilarious just given that they've been in a vault their entire lives. The quest really just boils down to speaking to the Overseer and convincing him that the vault is doomed if he doesn't open it up to the rest of the world. He basically goes, "Oh man, I didn't think of that," and then runs off while speaking at an aggressively normal volume to his daughter and the rest of the vault.
Everyone, listen closely. After a discussion with your friend, I've made an important decision. In my attempts to keep us all safe, I have been, perhaps, overzealous.
The daughter becomes the new Overseer and then tells you to pack your shit because you can't stay here. You know, this vault sucks anyways. So now it's time for the Brotherhood to make its move on the Enclave. To do this, they've created the Iron Giant to go mess with them. Also, you get to choose between Power Armor or Recon Armor as your reward. The issue with this is that the game doesn't tell you what stats these armors have before you choose. So I chose the Power Armor because, come on, it's Power Armor, baby! But then it turns out that it decreases my agility by 2. I don't want that. So I gotta watch this whole cutscene over again because the game doesn't tell you which stats are on your choices. But at least now I get to march with this big anti-communist robot. Alright, so this is basically quick save the bridge. Because even standing at a relatively safe distance can cause your arm to get blown off. I mean, even the NPC allies are getting knocked the fuck out by this tremendously girthy metal man. The concept is great, but Christ, the technology just wasn't there to properly do it in 2008. I mean, come on, the robot's leg animation doesn't even function properly most of the time. I just like that these guys are acting like they're super important to the combat, like we don't have a large and in charge death machine Tom Bradying nukes from across the bridge. So I finally make it to the rotunda where the purifier is housed after fighting all 4 Enclave soldiers protecting it, And then I talked this guy out of his entire plan because I'm so goddamn suave. And I remember this shit because when I was playing through my very first playthrough in 2008, I said, that's dumb. So they want to make this shit really dramatic, right? They want you to do the whole hero thing and sacrifice yourself to stop the purifier from exploding because apparently it's gonna explode. In this explosion scenario, you actually would be a hero. Because even the Enclave, from what you know, literally wants the Wasteland to be saved. They just want to be in charge of it instead of the Brotherhood, which makes them the bad guys, I guess. Maybe something went over my head here, it just seems kind of ridiculous to me. I mean, this shit is basically Republicans versus Democrats at this point. Except instead of civil debates, everybody kills each other when they disagree. At any rate, Bethesda is just foaming at the mouth for this heroic sacrifice at this point. Now, if you don't have the DLC, and I remember this happening, when you go to ask Fox to stop the purifier from exploding, he tells you that this is your destiny. Like legit, this guy is fucking immune. Immune to radiation. He cannot die from this. And he tells you, nah, you gotta do this, man. This is your destiny, dude. You gotta do this. I guess when the DLC came out, the writers went, yeah, that was pretty goddamn stupid, wasn't it? And they allow you to convince Fox to do it. The end result doesn't really matter because the only real differences here stem from if you send in Sarah to stop the explosion, inject the modified FEV to destroy all radiation, or if you just do nothing. Everything else gives you the same result because you wake up in the Citadel regardless as long as you have the DLC, even if you sacrificed yourself. God, it's actually frustrating how incompetent the main storyline's writing is. Like, the ending cinematic even goes, but the Vault Dweller did not follow in his father's footsteps. He was not brave enough, and instead sent in a true hero to stop the purifier from exploding. My guy, the fucking true hero is immune to radiation. How does this make me less of a hero? It just makes me smart. Next you'll tell me that I've been in a coma for 60 years and my son is now the bad guy. Fucking stupid. And that about wraps up Fallout 3 for now. I know there's quite a lot more to cover with the DLC, and trust me, I recorded that too. But this has been my longest video yet, and I really just want to get something out. Honestly, Fallout 3 surprised me a lot more than I thought it would. There are a lot of fun and cool ideas that tend to be overshadowed by Fallout New Vegas. The high points are very high, and the low points are abysmal. Just like the light colors in the game are bright, and the dark parts are hard to see anything in. I enjoyed the game quite a lot, even if it ended on a bit of a sour note with the main plot. But despite the speed bumps in the game, I've always remembered how silly the main plot is, and I always remembered the less fun stuff like city navigation. So is Fallout 3 as good as I remember? Yeah, it's pretty good. I liked it. Thanks for watching. This video is too long and I don't know why I went this hard on it, but hey, here we are. So seriously, thanks for sticking around this long. I'm definitely going to hit the DLC in the next video. And I'll probably do Skyrim someday in the near future, but not for a few videos, just for my own sanity's sake. Anyways, I have a Twitch where I stream when I'm not spending all of my free time making videos. I have a Twitter where I say some things that other people say better. And I have a Discord where you can hang out and chill in between videos. And that is it. Have a good one.